Everyone. Welcome to Talk Back. I realized this morning it's 9/11. It's September 11th, 2024. And I think before we begin our show, I had another show earlier today and I realized it too. We really need to say a few words about honoring those who lost their lives in 9/11 23 years ago. And I think also we have to remind ourselves as Americans, no matter what political party or what kind of person you are in any fashion, that during that time we united as one. We united as Americans. We all were together. And that kind of unity is seems to be lost today. We have a very contentious election coming up. And we're going to talk today about politics. My show earlier today was my friend Vivian Zoe having an art show. We talked about how art is a unifier. Art reflects on our humanity. It helps us calm down, helps bring us together. I think our show today is not going to be calming because I think all of us are living in a tumultuous time politically. And I personally believe that this is not an ordinary political time. And we're going to start by talking somewhat about the debate last night between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I don't think that Donald Trump deserves the respect of a normal political candidate to stand on a stage asking us to elect him as president because of what he has done and what we have proof of what he has done. On the other hand, as someone who is partisan in my feelings about this, it certainly helped shine a light on Kamala. It was a good opportunity for her to show that she could be presidential, and that was important. So, with these remarks, I'm going to ask my guests to introduce themselves. I have here Greg Loudon, who is in Berkeley, in California. He works in the institute as a staff member for is it the Latin American Affairs Institute? Am I close?
The Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies.
Ah, okay, at Berkeley in California. Welcome. And Karen Melkonian and Shannon Loudon, two attorneys, one in Boston, Karen, and Shannon, an attorney in Connecticut. So I want you to uh, go off my initial remarks. I'll start with Greg. You can unmute when you're talking.
So Sheila, thank you. I want to actually bring up the one thing, speaking as someone who works in this area, uh, September 11th, we should not just remember what happened in New York City in 2001. We should also remember what happened in the country of Chile in 1973. This is the 51st anniversary of the Pinochet coup in Chile, overthrowing that government. Um, that being said, uh, the thing that's on my mind right now is a coup, is some form of interference with an open and fair election that will throw the U.S. government into doubt, given Trump's fairly disastrous performance at the debate last night.
So, yeah, I think one of the questions the moderators didn't ask about, although they did talk about whether or not he believed he won the election in 2020, he basically said he won. Um, they should have talked about, are you making plans for denying the election coming up? What have you done? What have you engineered with all of the different election people in some of the states and getting ready for doing the kind of thing that you tried to do before? Now, there wasn't enough emphasis on it, and Kamala didn't mention it, which I think she should. She mentioned a litany of a bunch of stuff. She should have mentioned that. Okay, Shannon, your response.
Well, thank you again, Sheila, for getting us together. It's always fun to be with all of you and talk about these important issues. Um, I too was reminded, and I always remember where I was when I heard the news about September 11th. It certainly is a day of tremendous sadness for the United States. And frankly, I hope, as my brother said, we're not heading for a problematic situation in the United States without any interference from foreign entities. after November 5th, depending on what's going to happen there. With regard to the debate, real quickly, I just was very, very pleased with Kamala's performance. And while I thought former President Trump did an okay job, much better than I thought he was going to do. What I was very interested in is if you actually listen to his words, I think a lot of it sounded kind of crazy. But I don't know how many people actually listen to the words, unfortunately, as opposed to the demeanor and how he is trying to get across. And the final thing I'll say, sorry to go on and on, I'm very interested to know how much time each of the candidates got to speak, because it really felt to me like there was way too much time given to Trump, whereas Kamala was incredible at being succinct. And very direct as far as what her plans are, what her policies are, and who she will be as president of the United States. Thanks.
I can tell you, Shannon, I did learn about the exact amount of time. It seems that he got 5 minutes more. He spoke for 42 minutes and she spoke for 37 minutes. 5 minutes is a long time. On the other hand, I've heard some pundits say that they gave him more time so he could get himself into more trouble the more he spoke. Let him speak so he can rope himself. But on the other hand, I don't think the moderators did that. I did notice, and we can comment on it, that the moderators allowed him to respond. He always seemed to have the last comment for each question. But again, we can't quibble about that. But it was 42 and 37. All right,
Thank you.
Karen.
Well, again, thank you, everybody. It's good to be back. I was thinking about 9/11 this morning because I did watch some of the news this morning, and I was very saddened. And my brother worked in that area and got off in that train station in the World Trade Center. And I was here and I couldn't reach them for hours, my family in New York. So for several hours, I wasn't sure where he was. But it turns out that he had gone to London for a work trip, and like a few days prior that I hadn't known. And so he was actually fine, just stuck in London. So I was reminded, and I took my car and went right to New York to find them. So it was a little traumatic, and I feel, I'm reminded of all of the stories of the people and the sacrifices people made, and the and that are ongoing, and that we as a country have not done a good job taking care of the people who were involved in that in many ways. So that was something I was reminded of. As far as the debate last night went, I think I tend toward being Pollyanna-ish at times, because I just can't take too much negativity. I was so down for a while here. So what I think is, I think that she looked good and he didn't. He looked snivelly, and she got her point across. And I think the one time they actually cut her off, I think she looked better and more presidential and not like a child. And so I actually think at the end of the day, we talk about fairness, but I think in the big picture that served her. The second thing that I thought about today, because I was actually found humor last night in the language of the illegal alien, transgender, Haitian immigrants from prison are coming to your neighborhood to eat your pets. And then I realized he was compiling his basic talking points and didn't separate them out. But then I thought more about that today. And I just thought, oh my goodness, because it may not be that people actually believe that that's happening, but it reminds them of their fear. So they'll say, oh, I don't, it's like a whole conceit of this type of person and his movement. And he may be nuts, but when he talks about transgender, it doesn't matter what he's saying. It reminds people, and he's just saying, be fearful of all of this. Be fearful that illegal aliens can come, and they call them people illegal aliens, which is whatever. He's dehumanizing people, and he's leaving people with the impression to fear. So in fact, it doesn't matter that what he said made no sense. He used the words and invoked fear, and that is very dangerous.
Well, even Kamala Harris said at the outset he is going to talk about immigration and use that fear mongering at times to respond to a question when it's not even the topic. And of course, he did that at every turn. That the xenophobic, racist tropes that he uses. The immigrants are coming after you. It just is outrageous. But here's my point, and I want Greg to answer it because he didn't talk about the debate. So we've had this character for 9 years in our faces. Every day we're embroiled with what he's doing, what he's saying, his lies. And he got elected once with the Electoral College. I'm listening to some of the pundits, reading some of the articles. The people who've been with him for 9 years are not leaving him because he talked about uh, immigrants coming after your dogs and cats. They're staying with him. So this is what I want you to comment on, Greg. So I learned finally, I've been asking, how many Americans don't vote, don't register? It's about 80 million Americans do not vote. So last we had 160 million voted, right? About that. And now we have 80 million. So unless, and the undecideds are so tiny, what the Democrats have to do is harness the energy and get of those 80 million, a bunch of them registered and they vote, because many political science studies have shown that the unregistered people, if they registered, would probably tend more to vote Democratic. So now I give you the floor, Greg, to talk about the debate and my comment just now.
Well, I mean, I agree with Karen that essentially his one tactic is fear. That's the only thing he has. Um, it's interesting that he basically tried to. The only thing he has as a policy proposal is our tariffs and deporting people, and so he tries to tie everything to that. But as to regarding your comment, that's where my sort of slow rolling coup worries are centered. That essentially the way that the to defeat him is to get people to vote, and at every level, supporters of Donald Trump are working to make that harder, working to make that more fraught, working to make that more, in some cases, dangerous, and working to prevent people from voting. Because if more people vote, as you say, they don't do well. The ones that are getting to me are the stories in Florida of police being deployed to check on whether people actually signed an anti-abortion amendment petition that would get the amendment on the ballot. They're literally deploying police officers to go door to door and question people about their signature on a petition, in trying to prevent or trying to generate some evidence that something untoward was happening. And that is the core of their strategy, is to cast doubt on the legitimacy of any election, period, because they feel it is likely they would lose on the merits.
So, one of the things that we utilize when we do these pundit shows is I check out a lot of the political cartoons. And it's a good entree into a discussion. So I'm going to turn to them now and we're going to talk about them in relation to what's going on. So can you, let me see, slideshow from the beginning. Can you see this? Can you see the slide? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me go back then. I have to go back one. Previous slide. Here you go. All right, you guys see it. Harris Trump did. All right, Shannon, just want to make one comment on this slide, which is about the debates. They haven't had any post-debate cartoons yet. I imagine there will be a plenty, but it's too early for those today.
Well, I love that they picture Kamala as preparing in a hazmat suit to go up against the I don't know, that the slime, which is perfect that he's I guess, drawing stuff out of a city sewer, or I would even think climbing out of the city sewer, based on what he spews. So I think it's wonderful that they're protecting her in that regard. I think I'll leave it at that. I mean, she certainly needed protection from the vitriol and the commentary that came at her last night, came at the administration that she's a part of. But I think she was well prepared and would not have needed such a suit. She uses her words very well, and that's her suit.
I agree with you. I think that suit was unnecessary, that she stood there. She looked at him in the eye. He never looked at her in the eye, I don't think.
Nope.
And she didn't need that suit. All right,
Well,
Karen.
the other, hold on, one more thing I wanted to say. I apologize.
No, go ahead.
One of the things I loved last night, that I do think is getting play in the media, is how many times she baited him. So I do believe it wasn't really as what am I trying to say? Visible, or wasn't as knowable. But she really did a terrific job with baiting him with coming out with the statement about the illegal alien, transgender, pet killers, and whatnot, and other issues that she knew would get his goat, about the fact that he lost the election, about the fact that 800 million people fired him in 2020. So
80
I wanted
million.
to comment on that.
I wish it were 800 million, but more like 81 million.
Oh, well, I thought it was, I would prefer 800 million.
I know. Well, yeah, it's very, very interesting. Let's see. Karen, do you have a comment on that?
Well, it's funny because I didn't really understand it at first. And my first thought was he came out of the sewer, and after he got elected, see, I thought that guy was him at first. And it looked like they're holding her back. And that after he got elected, he's like basically taking her away. I mean, I didn't really look at the whole hazmat suit, but my first Rorschach review of that was he comes out of the sewer. If he wins, he's going to take her away. And he's like basically, gonna basically stifle her and shut her up because he's going to arrest his political enemies. So that was without really looking at the more detailed view of it. I suppose that's my fear then.
Okay, so now I want to go to Greg because I want you to pick up on your thoughts. So my question is, because I said, it doesn't matter for his people. He could have brought a gun and shot somebody in the studio that night and they'd still vote for him. So my point that I want you to talk about, Greg, is, does this debate mean anything when we're worried about the coup? What impact will this debate have, despite the fact how well she's done? What will it mean for the campaign?
Well, first of all, reacting to this cartoon, Trump's complaint this morning was he basically has decided, since he sort of objectively lost, that people must have cheated him. And his complaint this morning was that Kamala looked like she knew the questions, implying that ABC had shared the questions with Harris in advance. And my reaction to that was, that's called debate preparation. And you didn't do that. You have said all along, I just need to wing it. Well, when you have been prepared for a debate by people asking you the questions they anticipate, you'll look smoother. Sorry, that's just a fact of life. In terms of, I'm sorry. Can you rephrase? Can you refresh the second part of your question?
You to talk about the impact. I mean, how important was this in light of what you're worried about, in light of the campaign? Well, again, my thought being that it did give her the biggest platform she needed to present herself to the American people and to show, yeah, I'm a president. I stood up there and you can elect me as your president, as your commander in chief. She passed that test. So it was good in that vein. But what else? How else does it have impact on the campaign?
To me, I was actually discussing this with a friend earlier today. I think the thing is, at this point, given how Trump has sort of poisoned political discourse in the country, debates are no longer about presenting ideas that you intend to convince people. They are about presenting yourself as a viable candidate, as a commander-in-chief in this particular case. And the larger thing for me is that the way it will impact the race is not in impacting individual voters directly, but in impacting the media coverage of the candidates. When the media sees her as a more viable candidate or as a more presidential candidate, the tenor of their stories over time and in the aggregate changes. And that's, one of the things as a political scientist is that the media can't tell people how to feel. Coverage can't tell people how to decide about issues or candidates. They can tell them what to think about. It's called priming as an effect. And basically, if they cover this, as Shannon said, that she managed to basically manipulate Trump into reacting like she wanted to, which echoes her words in the debate about foreign dictators manipulating Trump like they wanted to, and how easy it is, and that penetrates the media, that can have a cumulative impact. I don't think there will be much of a bounce either way. There was a bounce, however, in terms of people needing to know more. And Kamala did very well in the immediate post-debate reaction. The other thing is the first reaction I saw was the cover of the Drudge Report, which basically said it's over when they were reporting on the debate performance. Oh no, excuse me. It said the end with a picture of Donald Trump surrounded by cats. When the Drudge Report is doing that, you had a bad night as a conservative in a debate.
Right. Well, Drudge has been against Trump for a while now. I don't know what created that rift, but this is not the first time he's been anti-Trump. All right, so we're going to move on, and I have several slides all about the convention because I want you to talk about this. Shannon, how important was the convention as a staging ground for Kamala to present herself to the American people and for the Democratic Party to present itself in a way, a more uplifting way to the American people?
Before I answer that, Sheila, Karen was raising her hand, so I wanted to let her speak, if that's okay with you.
Okay, guys, I can't see you, so you're just gonna have to let me call on you. So, Karen, did you want to make a comment about the last slide?
I wanted to make a comment to something Greg said, and I just contribute this for a moment. One thing that the media keeps doing, and we all do, is we respond. And I think what Kamala and Tim Walz have done well is to not respond. So, for example, when he gets up and says everybody, she's cheating, I think the response is, how do you cheat on something when everyone should know? You all know the questions in advance. But the minute the media reacts and reports it, we validate him. Even if they're not validating, we put it out there. So I just think the media takes these things, does a back and forth on them, and then they are actually just out there in the world. That's number one. Number two, that Greg, you said that you think what's important here was the sound bites and that the media will take. But I also think that to the extent, and I will say my 19-year-old called me in the middle of it and watched the rest of the debate with me on FaceTime. So to the extent, and his job at school is to tell people how to get their absentee ballots, because the more people that vote, even if we don't think it matters in our states, the more total number of people that vote. The coup is, it may not stop the coup because we still have electoral college, but the more popular vote there is, the better off we are. And so I am really pushing for, we live in Massachusetts, get everyone to get their absentee ballots and vote, because I do think that is important. That's all I wanted to
Great.
say.
Okay, I just want to let you guys know my screen only shows the the slides, so I can't recognize your hands up. So I will call on you, and you'll get a chance to say whatever you need to say. All right, so let's go back to the question I asked you, Shannon, about the power of the DNC, how that introduced Harris and the Democratic Party, hopefully in a new light.
Well, I thought the convention was excellent, and I think especially in contrast to the Republican convention, I think what's so telling to me about the presidential power, so to speak, or gravitas of Kamala, is just how many very, for lack of a better term, important Democrats spoke on her behalf and got up and spoke about she and Tim Walz, and including former members of the Trump administration who are now speaking out on behalf of Kamala, and how different and better a job she would do as president. So I was very heartened by the convention. I thought Michelle Obama and former President Obama did incredible jobs. I was very moved by Michelle Obama's speech. And then Kamala hit it out of the park also. She just came across as, to me, who she is. Someone who cares, someone who is going to look out for not just the wealthiest Americans, but hopefully all Americans, especially the middle class, and getting back to, moving forward instead of focusing on being all negative about the United States. I think something that really strikes me about Make America Great Again is it puts all of us down. It says we're not currently great. And that really troubles me. The fact that you can be so negative about your country that you have to believe that only you can make it great again. So in conclusion, the convention was great. I really appreciated, especially the keynote speakers every night, and thought that Kamala came across as somebody who's going to make a great president.
So the campaign people over history will usually say the more hopeful candidate, the more uplifting speaker will win over the negative speaker, over the fear-mongering speaker. And what the DNC did is they took the flag and patriotism away from the Republicans, saying that they're the only ones. I think that was masterful of that. How many flags did we see? USA chants, that was great. And then I thought, and I want Greg to talk about this, the 1-2 punch of Leon Panetta and who was the other one? Two people spoke and gave her the bona fides of a commander in chief. Oh, Kinzinger, the fact that Adam Kinzinger and then Leon Panetta spoke, I think helped her to get people to say, you can be a commander in chief. Okay, Greg.
I think it's strange. My reaction is that the conventions themselves are very clubby. They are speaking to there are very few independent people who watch political conventions, especially for any duration. So what is chosen to be highlighted in a more general media platform ends up being what the takeaway is. And in that regard, I agree with Shannon. The biggest thing was the contrast that were drawn between the two conventions in terms of enthusiasm, in terms of the composition of the attendees. When they were announcing the roll call for the votes, and they put side by side this elderly, gray-haired speaker at the Republican convention talking to an empty, dead hall, doing the roll call of the states, versus when they did it at the Democratic convention and every state had their sort of celebrity person to come up and speak and do something enthusiastic. That general tenor was more important, I think, than any particular speech. That said, I mean, laying out what Kamala Harris has done as vice president is something that is very valuable because it doesn't get reported on. The fact that she is in Germany talking with world leaders, the fact that she has been sent to various international conferences to deal with world leaders as as a representative of the current administration, that needs to be emphasized, and I think they did a good job of that.
Let's go on. So, um, if you recall last night at the debate, Trump turned to her, so despicable, and said, he hates you, Biden hates you. Do you remember that? And here we have this, I'm stuck with her, making fun of her laugh. And I think that all of these ploys by Trump, making fun of her laugh, saying that she's dumb, making fun of her race, I think they're all backfiring. Karen, what do you think?
Do I think that his insults are backfiring? I think
Yeah,
that, first of all, I did play a little of a game last night. He didn't say, what did we say, nasty or stupid that many times, just so you know. But I think that nothing matters because there's a cult. The cult, he could say whatever and he's in a cult. And so, I really have let go of that. Like, I can't keep focusing on, does it make a difference? How do these, because really we're talking about a cult, which is far fewer than the rest of people who would vote normally. And so I'm trying not to focus on how much of a difference does it make. I think from my perspective, he looked like he was in kindergarten, and he looked like that to me was the damage. Less these insults, but this kind of unpresidential behavior. Like, we were looking at the way he was holding himself, his hand movements, the look on his face. He was like a person who couldn't control his emotions. Whereas everything was a formula for her. Everything was, she had it down. She knew how she was going to react. She could show emotion when she wanted to, but she spoke from the brain and from what she felt. He spoke from how he felt every time he got cornered. So if anything could make a difference to anybody, and again, I think it's silly to talk about the people that are going to follow him until, to wherever.
Right. But I think this cartoon talks more about the memes they were trying to instill in the American people. Like, the Democrats are stuck with her. She's not going to rise. She's no good. She has a bad. I'm saying those things have not come to pass. The Republicans were hoping that she would be looked upon as like the next second choice who wasn't going to make it, but she made it big time. I think that's what this cartoon is trying to show, not necessarily the debate.
I mean, I was going to say, I think that I think you talked about the convention a minute ago. I think that not only was it more positive, I mean, it was fun. Like, I sat there and watched every night, every minute of the convention. They made it fun for me. And so for people who were slightly engaged, it was fun. It made me feel so much better about everything. She held herself and she commanded herself. She commanded herself last night. So I think that those memes and those little sound bites, they're just going to play into the people who don't want to think into themselves anyway. And for those of us who think about it, it won't. I do think the most important group are the youth, because periodically I hear little tidbits, of mom or whomever, like, what do you think of that? And I have to go back because I think they're the ones who are the most subjected or easily influenced by that. And so that's the concern for me, is more that voting group that gets all their news that way and basically doesn't question what they see. So, but other than that, I think she showed herself to be other than those memes, and they're having a hard time making them stick.
So now let's go back in history. And we know that I believe the Democratic Party has sabotaged itself a lot throughout history by either having such intra-party fights. I think of McCarthy and Humphrey in 1968. I think, of course, of Al Gore and Ralph Nader in 2000. Were it not for the large third party vote or the Ralph Nader vote, Gore would have been president. Forget even if you leave out the Supreme Court issue as well. In 2016, clearly, Jill Stein, if you look at her percentages, she Hillary Clinton in the important Midwestern states that gave Donald Trump the very close electoral college. And so now I think a lot of us were worried about RFK. I'm going to ask you, Shannon. We were worried about RFK that at one point, oh my God, he was in the polls at like 15-20%. But now he's with Trump, and hopefully his influence is waning. What do you think, Shannon?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think with all of the facts that have come out about his craziness, including the bear cub in Central Park, just crazy stuff. And my understanding is he reached out to the Harris campaign prior to going over to Trump to ask for a cabinet position in exchange for his endorsement of her, and was denied, was turned down. So my initial concern was, who would he draw votes from? Just given that, as this says, the Kennedy legacy, of course, we would think that he would draw votes from Kamala. But now I don't think he does anything except for affirm the craziness of the Trump-Vance campaign by signing on to their campaign. I don't think it gives Trump any bump. It just adds to the craziness yeah, I'll just stick with that. The craziness of the Trump-Vance campaign. He's just one more character in their panoply of crazy people.
It's a real shame as far as the legacy of the Kennedy family goes. Sad. But I remember reading the story about the bear cub found in Central Park was in the New York Times years ago. And I remember reading about it. It was a big news story in the paper. People want to know, where the heck did that come from? I don't think they ever found out. So the fact that it's come back to haunt him all these years later is really something. But it was a news article years ago. Anyway. All right. This is an interesting one because I'm interested in history. I love this cartoon, the devolution of the GOP from, Lincoln to Roosevelt to Eisenhower to Nixon to Reagan to Bush, which I like to call Shrub, not Bush. And then what's his name? Trump. So, Greg, what do you think of this? I read books where they start the devolution of the party after, partly with Reagan, when he said that the problem of government is not the solution, government is the problem. I mean, how do you become the president of a corporation and say the corporation stinks, right? That's what he did, and told us that, we're not all in this together. The government is something out there. It's not us. He started that. And then Newt Gingrich helped to continue that ultra partisan right wing lurch of nihilism that we now have with Trump. So, your thoughts on this cartoon, Greg?
Well, we just had another 50th anniversary a few days ago of the original sin of this devolution, which was when Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon in 1974. Right. And I think that was the signal that to a certain brand of Republican, winning mattered more than anything else. And not having the crimes that Nixon committed litigated in public mattered more than any sense of responsibility for the president and the law. We can see that in the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity. That is the culmination of that 50 years. of the law doesn't matter as long as you're winning. That what we're doing doesn't matter as long as you're winning. And I think that, whether it's Ford and the pardon or the Republican primary leading up to the 1980 elections, it's a fairly straight line down in terms of the decreasing stature of the Republican standard bearers. I mean, you could go Bush Jr. or George W. Bush and Bob Dole still had some independent stature as politicians and as leaders. But when you got to George H.W. Bush.
George
George W. Bush, when you got to George W. Bush, who was essentially a media creation, and they proved that they could pull one over on the American electorate by selling him, it just accelerated it. And I think, what longtime Republicans like Kinzer, like Liz Cheney, like Dick Cheney, coming out and saying this is not what we signed up for, ignores their complicity in creating this.
Exactly.
Basically you can't start down the road of saying we really don't have to obey the law if we're going to win, and then later on say, well, this person didn't obey the law and therefore we disown him. They've been walking down this road for 50 years.
And I also look at it, I want Shannon to comment on this. I also look at it as the evolution of the Republican Party becoming racist. And they started out more, let's go back to Nixon and the silent majority. That was a buzzword for racism, wasn't it? For attracting that silent majority. And then what did Reagan do? He started his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Why do you do that? And maybe he made famous the welfare queen driving the Cadillac, the black welfare queen of the Cadillac. George H. had the Willie Horton ad. Remember that? George W. came across as, oh, I'm very compassionate. He brought the Christian evangelicals and he knew that the Christian evangelicals and the anti-abortion crowd would help him. And of course, Donald Trump, the ultimate racist. So I see the evolution from the silent majority to outright racism, xenophobia coming through the Republican Party. And I agree with you. We can give Liz Cheney all the kudos she's getting now. She voted for this guy in 2016 and in 2020. All right. I'm getting verklempt. Shannon, what do you say?
Well, I think this is really poignant to look at the de-evolution of the Republican Party. And I was talking with friends at a debate watching party last night. When did it really all start to go so wrong? And I think it's fascinating what Gregory pointed out about the 50-year anniversary of the pardon and whatnot. But I think it's even been more since the Tea Party arose. And the Republican Party really increasingly started to be divided and, in my opinion, go off the rails. They no longer stand for what Lincoln stood for, obviously. And I think that the for whatever you call it, extreme right of the party has drawn it down. And then because of the power of the extreme right, as far as its effect on voters and getting elected and the rest of the party necessarily, other than the Kinzingers and Cheneys, have to pander to that part of the party to raise the money to get reelected and whatnot. To me, it's just disgusting what's happened to their party. I respected Republicans in the past, and now it's just very difficult to even have discussions with them.
So, Karen, I'm Kamala Harris for and I'm Donald Trump out for myself. did she do a good job of prosecuting him?
Can I just say something about the prior cartoon, and then I'm going to say something
All
about
right.
the one thing I want to say is, you just put the presidents as the de-evolution. I think the de-evolution to me started at Brown v. Board of Education and the Koch brothers, and the sort of slow and stealth conceit to create groups that funded money, that funded people, that got this idea that white people were being gypped, and that how dare our taxes go there. And I think that's where that I just wanted to say one thing we didn't mention was what went on behind the scenes and who was the think tank getting these people in place. Now, that being said, can you ask your question again? They don't hold her accountable. I don't get accountable. I mean,
Yeah, there's that.
The question was whether Kamala
did she
prosecuted her case.
I think she did, actually. And I think, there's a lot, again, I keep going back to this. We hold her to the highest of standards. We hold him to no standard at all. People talk about, well, she missed this. She could have said that. Yes, she prosecuted her case. She showed him to be somebody. I thought her most important lines was that he doesn't care about you. And then she goaded him into demonstrating that without having to say it. When she said people are leaving your party, they're leaving. And then I think she did that. And I think again, if people really wanted to get their policy points last night, I'm not sure how many people are really absorbing that, but she prosecuted the case that she is far more presidential in temperament, in just general knowledge, and in not talking about herself, and in continuing to talk about what she's going to do for the American people, that she isn't focused on herself. The other person solely talks about herself, and she kept showing it. She kept doing things to make them see it.
Right. And now this cartoon talks about early voting. And of course, all the good vibrations Trump would like and his campaign would like nothing but to knock them down. I was talking to Shannon a couple of weeks ago on the good idea to have a vote day one. Let's all vote the first day of early voting. Let's get that going. The more people vote early, the less the work the campaigns have to do to call out people to come out and vote, and it will just give that much more impetus to the election, right, Shannon? You think so?
Yes, and I've actually been talking to people to make sure that they're aware of the timing for early voting in Connecticut, which in and of itself right now cuts back all the time for campaigning. We're not just looking at November 5th, we're looking at 2 weeks before November 5th, as far as when to make our points to the electorate.
October 21st is early voting starts, and it's from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And we have October 21st to the 31st here in Connecticut, then November 1 to 3. So I hope it'll be an important experiment for our state. It's very costly to keep all the workers there for the early voting. It better make a big difference in turnout. Let's see if we get more than 80% in Connecticut because we have early voting now. We'll check that out. All right, Shannon, take a look at this one. Whoever heard you get indicted for interfering with a presidential election where you have every right to do it. There you go. All his legal crap. I like this one too. Shannon, talk about it.
What would you like me to talk about, Sheila?
This cartoon. Take a look.
I'm looking at it. What disgusts me, I guess, in that regard is exactly what we've seen. And he actually last night bragged about it and continues to brag about how he brought down Roe versus Wade because of what he did to the United States Supreme Court in appointing 3 justices to serve on it, who have now formed the majority to take down Roe. I have been waiting and waiting and waiting for Jack Smith to have his chance. I'm hoping the 11th Circuit not only overturns Cannon's dismissal of that case, but also perhaps suggests that maybe she no longer should sit over the case and have that case in her court. But I guess the final thing I'll say is, while I was not surprised at what Judge Merchan did, because I think he was very astute in not allowing himself to be accused of affecting the outcome of an election. I have been very disappointed that it's taken this long to have the sentencing, to have any resolution to that, because I do think that it's a tremendous understatement to say a unique situation in which we've got a presidential candidate, amazingly, who has been and found guilty of 34 felonies. Incredible to me that in the United States is allowed to be a presidential candidate. So I'm very upset that the sentencing hasn't occurred before now, and now it won't even occur until after Election Day, which I'm hoping is when maybe the decision there was that you can't put a presidential candidate in jail, but maybe you can put a loser of a presidential election in jail.
Let's hope Merchan was thinking that, but I'm disappointed too. Greg, I'm looking at the Supreme Court as his lawyers, and I'm thinking about the immunity decision. Talk about that. And then here's the one, Lady Justice Cannon. Shannon mentioned that also. Why don't you talk about that, Greg?
Well, being the only non-lawyer in the conversation, I don't know technically what I would say. I think that I believe it was Justice Sotomayor in her dissent said, ended her dissent with fear for our democracy, I dissent. And that is essentially my takeaway from the immunity decision, that immunizing presidents from actions that are not only part of their official duties, but could be reasonably argued to be part of their official duties, is contrary to the founding principles of this country. That's the divine right of kings making a comeback. And in regards to it, something you put up earlier, one thing I think we neglected to mention about the devolution of the Republican Party is that it coincides with the rise of tremendous wealth inequality in the United States. And the people who support those think tanks that Karen was talking about are the people who have a vested interest in low taxes and low regulation. And for them, those think tanks are an investment. They are not purely a political statement. They have invested for 50 years in pushing the Republican Party to low taxes, no government, low regulations, and then that's the core belief. And then everything else is, how do I assemble a winning coalition that disguises that, that disguises that as our core principles. And the thing with the Supreme Court is those justices were put on the court based on propaganda campaigns run by institutions that were funded by that same group of people. Right. Now, I don't think you can call it, it's not an organized conspiracy. It is just, that is where their interests lie. Their interests lie in creating systems and establishing institutions that will not challenge the laissez-faire status quo of the religion of free market capitalism that they follow.
Right.
So the Supreme Court is an extension of the devolution of the Republican Party. Right. It's just the institutionalization of it in another branch of government.
And so, Karen, my thoughts on the immunity case is that they seem to have engineered it to answer everything in the Jack Smith case about the insurrection, right? So they basically looked at that case and say, what can we do to screw up that case so they cannot bring the evidence in? Do you agree with that?
I do. I think that cartoon, which I really got better than a minute ago, was the one where they said, see my lawyers, and they were the Supreme Court. Yeah. I mean, so to me, that wasn't about Roe v. Wade. That was about what again, who is Trump for? He's for himself. But right. I do have, do you want me to, I had more to say. Do you want me to go on?
Go on.
Okay. So one thing that Greg said was, they want low regulation, low government, low this, except when they want to get in your bedroom and in your doctor's office and actually control the very person that you are. So in other words, this is a group that wants everyone to be one way, and they've done everything they can to make us all, white, straight. That's the only people that get rights, right? And then the other thing about immunity, what I was going to say is, I don't know if, I didn't look at the one-to-one correlation with Jack Smith. That, I think, that and Chevron were the most deflating decisions. I had been a bit Pollyanna before that. Felt like, well, okay, they have to follow the law. Like, they can't completely throw it all out here. And they did. And the outer perimeter, with, if I can make a phone call to the Justice Department, then you can't look behind the phone call to see if it was corrupt. And so when we throw them all in the same pile, Amy Coney Barrett actually called them out on that. She said you can't have a quid without a quo, and you can't have and she made it very clear in that portion of her opinion that was really among the biggest ills of the immunity decision, that they said you can't look behind the outer perimeter. So she actually called out and did not agree with that portion of the decision, which was the most evil part, because it means you could call the Justice Department and have them murder you. It means that Joe Biden could call the Justice Department and say whatever he wants, because it would be within the outer perimeter. He can call them. And that, I think, is really the crime of that opinion. And yes, that was just for him, because they know why he called the Justice Department.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So now what I'm going to do is, since we've gone almost 60 minutes, for each slide coming up, I'm going to ask each of you to just give me one or no more than 2 sentences to give your thoughts on each on the slide, so we can get through some of these things. Okay? You think you can do it? Let's see.
Actually, Sheila, I'm sorry. I have to check out. I have a hard
You have
stop
to
at the
check out?
hour.
Okay, Greg, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. So
All right, have a good
Karen
day.
and, can you stay another 10, 15 minutes, Karen and Shannon?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just go through, but again, I want to succeed. Let's see if you can circumscribe all of your remarks into just a succinct sentence or two.
If we can be Kamala Harris, huh?
Well, or she was even wordier than that, but let's see. She took 2 minutes for each question. Let's just see what we have. Okay, Shannon, give me 1 or 2 sentences on this.
I thought this was disgusting. To use a cemetery where national heroes are buried for an election, and the sorrow of the families whose family members are buried there was just disgusting to me.
Okay. Karen.
I think that there is no low to which this man won't sink to be self-serving, and that he will take, and that everyone will follow him down into the dirt.
See how easy that is? It's great. All right, Shannon.
This is one of the more troubling things, and I don't think they got a direct answer out of Trump even last night. Where does he stand on abortion? Sorry, this is more than a long run-on sentence.
You can take a little bit more. Go ahead.
I was absolutely flabbergasted that he basically suggested that Kamala stands for murder, because he talked about after children have been born, killing them. I think the definition of that is murder.
Yes. Well, these are lies. He keeps saying that, but there are people who are believing that. But the one thing he did not do, which is very interesting, his vice presidential guy, J.D. Vance, said absolutely, if an abortion ban comes to Trump's desk, he will veto it. And that messed up the whole campaign, because he's got to walk a fine line to keep those evangelicals with him, right? So last night he refused to say if he would sign one or not. He's not answering that question. Right? All right. So She did a good job on that question. All right, Karen.
Well, we are in a new moment of sexism, showing really where the party and the funds and the people behind this movement stand, which is that we should take women basically shouldn't have the right to vote. Neither should Black people. We need to roll everything back to the days where men were in charge and women only had uteruses, and they used them when we told them to. And when they could no longer use their uterus, they were there to take care of other people's babies. And so it really is about rolling everything back, putting white men in charge of everything, and only valuing women based on their fertility and their procreation and nothing more.
Okay, and just a final point on this. J.D. Vance had come out years ago and said that women who have children or families, husband and wife who have children, should get more votes. Their votes should be bigger, better.
I didn't know that.
Yes, he did. They should get it like an extra vote because a childless person doesn't deserve that. Okay, Shannon. Shannon.
That was the best.
Yes. Excuse me. My crowd is bigger than Trump's. They are illegal migrants.
Well, last night he said they bust people into her event. Did you hear that? They bust
Yes,
people
yes,
in.
I did hear that.
And then they were AI generated. He had another thing. I think I'm going to step in for 1 second to say that I think the issue about his crowds was the biggest point that got him rattled. That he cannot take. He doesn't have the biggest. I mean, after all, remember how he complained when he was inaugurated that it was wrong. Obama did not have the biggest inauguration crowds. And then his press secretary, that whatever his name was,
Ron Spicer.
Yeah, he came up and said to the press, the respected Washington press corps, we had the biggest crowds ever in the history of the thing. And that's when Kelly and Conway said, well, we have alternative facts. So I think the crowd issue, Shannon, is like the biggest thing that bothers him. He's got to be the best, number one.
Well, to use his language, it's huge. It's all about his ego, and I remembered to me even more telling was the aerial photos of the mall for the Obama inauguration versus the Trump inauguration. There was just no getting away from the fact that there was nowhere near the number of people at Trump's inauguration as at Obama's inauguration. But to me, one of the things that immigration, and illegal, calling everybody illegal aliens, just disgusting to me. How much that was a focus of last night for Trump. And he really went off the rails about that. The racism that was in one of his first statements about, and I hate to even repeat it, but basically that we won't have people to take jobs if we don't have Blacks and Hispanics or something like this. He's basically talked about their jobs. The racism and like, there's a cat lady. Hold on.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute, everybody.
Stop.
They were very scared last night of whether somebody was going to come and eat them.
Okay. But, she said it last night that he could not accept the fact that he lost. And so he will go to great lengths, even to stage an insurrection, even to kill his vice president. They built that noose. What do you think would have happened had they actually used that noose and tried to get a hold of Pence?
Nothing.
That would have been fine with him. That would have been fine with him. So the point is, the ego is so sick. The narcissism is so toxic, is so psychotic, is so outrageous. But the thing is, Shannon and Karen, his people love the misogynistic insults. They
Well,
love the
because Sheila,
anti-immigrant stuff. What
it,
they do, they
it
love
gets
hearing it.
well. Of course, because who are they? And the bottom line is exactly what Karen mentioned earlier. I think so much of the rhetoric comes out of a place of fear. They are no longer going to be the majority of Americans in the United States. So white men are scared to not to scared to death, but they're scared about what their place in American society is going to be. And
Right.
this is their reaction to support
It's not just,
somebody who placates them in that regard.
right, and it's not just that. The gender gap goes not just on the female side for the Democrats. More men vote for Trump than any other candidate.
Yep.
And more white women have been voting for Trump as well.
Yep.
So this is a serious issue. All right, let's go. We're violating my rule of one sentence.
Yes,
All
we
right,
are.
this
Two
is yeah.
sentences.
All right, this is part of what they tried to pull on Kamala Marxist. Remember, notice her father was a professor of economics at Stanford, I believe. And of course, you noticed last night Donald Trump said he was a Marxist. Okay. I don't think they want to portray her as a left-wing Marxist. One sentence, Shannon.
Oh no.
Try.
Go ahead, Karen.
Also,
Karen, what-
you shut me out of the last thing, and I'm going to say two things now about the last thing, which is that she's taking all these memes and putting them in her ads now. Good for her, and God bless Taylor Swift for a most beautifully written comment and a statement about AI and AI generating and fake news and lies. Okay, so this, I think, is it me?
Yeah, one sentence.
Okay, so can you give me a second to think? Okay, so I love Venn diagrams too, and I think that this shows the absolute hypocrisy of Donald Trump, because, you know, he's calling her a communist, right? But he's really a fascist himself, which really is a communist and a capitalist corporatist. And so he's actually in that Venn diagram himself. And what his conceit is, this is the last sentence, is to accuse everybody else of what he does. It gets out there in the world, everyone talks about it and defends, but that's who he is. He's a fascist.
Got it. Okay. Shannon. You got your thinking cap on, I hear.
Yeah, I
see.
do. So I'm not going to respond to this one. I'm going to say something that I wanted to say based on what you said about the alma mater, or where Kamala's father taught. One of the things that I loved last night, being a UPenn Law School graduate, is how Muir used Penn professors and their letter coming out of the Wharton School to contradict, and then Trump had to come back and say, well, I'm a graduate of Penn. That was a fun thing that I got out of last night. So Karen, if you've had more chance to look at this, go right ahead, but I'll see if I can
I think I have 1 second.
While you're thinking,
I have 1 minute. Say it now.
While you're thinking, I wanted to add that the professor of Wharton, who had Donald Trump as a student, has said that he was absolutely the dumbest student he has ever had. And that's a true statement. Look it up. All right, Karen, what were you going to say?
It doesn't make a difference to this group.
Right.
That's what this is to me.
That's what they're saying, that they're not really never Trumpers. Oh, yeah, I don't. It's this group that says, oh, I don't really like him. He's a despicable person, but oh, I love his policies. And you hear this with these undecided. The economy was so good under him. Yeah. Okay. Again, showing her hypocrisy. You have one sentence on this, Shannon?
No. How about that for a sentence?
I could give you a quick one. She showed how she really that she's being billed as being hypocritical. And she said, no, actually, if you read, I actually signed this thing that included some fracking that, like she explained that this is not hypocrisy, that they're billing it as it. And so, and everyone's pulling this particular string. But if we went back and read, she actually, there's not a lot of hypocrisy. People change their minds, but that's what I had to say.
And this one, Shannon, again, these are all the kind of memes they're trying to create against her that she's having to fight and defend.
Well, I think a really important thing that she said last night that that I wanted her to say for a long time is what the Biden-Harris administration inherited as far as the economy from the Trump administration, the Trump-Pence administration. I just think to continue to view the Democrats and go back 50 years to call us a tax and spend party, it just doesn't fit the bill anymore. We're so much more than that. We have such a bigger tent and umbrella, or however you want to describe it. That was the thing that, to me, between the two conventions was so telling.
Right.
The diversity at our convention and the white males at his convention.
Okay, I'm going to start going through a little more quickly because we're coming to the end. So I'm
Yes,
going to just
ma'am.
go these through fast. Again, if she becomes president, every state would be California. That's another thing against her. Again, that she's flip-flopping, right? You should call them, skip the primaries, avoid interviews, let the media cover you. She proved them all wrong last night. Now, here we go. I have a series of, we don't really have to, just a couple of words. The school shootings. Look at that poor kid. How I spent my summer break, not worrying about school shootings, really. And the first day of school, we had it right back. Thanks to the NRA, I can afford the fancy stationery, Georgia. Thoughts and prayers. What I did last summer, I got nothing. No Congress is acting on school shootings. Famous Georgia battlefields. How outrageous. Appalachia High School, next to all the great historical battlefields, that school where kids are getting killed. The Republican Party, let me inspect that book. Keep that gun. Use that gun. Practice with that gun. Shoot them up. But your book, I'm going to make sure to ban that book.
Yes.
Isn't that something?
Yep.
I'm going to have you all right. Here's another one. Permitless concealed carry starting in Louisiana. I hope that's fireworks. Oh, yeah? In many states in this country, you can have you don't need a permit to get a concealed carry.
Yep.
All right, Shannon, give me 2 sentences on this terrible issue because we have to get going.
Yes, we do. Just coming from the state of Connecticut, where all of this, as far as the outrageous school shooting started in Newtown, I'm just very proud of Senator Murphy and what he has done and how he has remained steadfast to make sure that's not forgotten. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And why doesn't it happen?
Do you want me to comment? Okay.
I want you to comment on this one, which is interesting. She's reading about school shootings. He's reading about Gaza and Israel. I wish they'd reach a ceasefire. And she says, me too, about the school shootings. Karen, 2 sentences.
Adults are selfish and don't care about their children here and don't care about anything but themselves. That was for and then this, let me be quick. Why don't we care more about what's going on here in front of ourselves and why people are so focused on what's going on there and making that their issue?
Right. Okay. And I think this is one of the last ones, because I think it summarizes what we're in for. We had no September debates. Now we're going to have overcooked October, nervous November, disconcerting December, vote challenges, Jittery January election certification. And that's the end of the show. We're going to come back. I'm going to, and we're going to, oh, is Greg still? Oh, Greg's not here.
Nope.
So we went through a lot of issues. I'm going to ask each of you for some very quick final thoughts about where we are in the election and what your thoughts are at this stage. Shannon.
I'll keep it very short, especially after last night and the last few weeks with Kamala Harris as our candidate and Tim Walz. We didn't really talk a lot about him, but what a vice presidential candidate. It's just very heartening to me. After the debate in June, despondent, didn't know what was going to happen as far as preventing another Trump presidency. And now I have hope. And one other thing I'll say is absolutely going to be working very, very hard to get out the vote because that's going to be critical to preventing another Trump presidency. I'm very curious to know. I've seen the polls. I'm very curious. I'm praying that the polls are wrong, and that and maybe we'll do this after election again, that it's not going to be a close race. Unfortunately, I think the Electoral College really screws it up, but I'm praying that the popular vote will be a landslide for Kamala and really give a mandate so that there isn't any jittery January.
Right. Okay, Karen, your final thoughts.
I'm hopeful, and I'm looking for my voice, as Michelle Obama told me, to do something, and I need to find that thing to do.
Okay, great. All right. So this is September, October version of our pundits. We'll see you either right before or right after the election. And I hope we'll be smiling then as we're smiling now. But again, another nod to the anniversary of 9/11 and to hope that our country can at some point unite as it did in the aftermath of that horrible event. Okay. We'll see you all next time on Talk Back. Bye.
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 Yes.
Stay on afterwards. We'll chat. Stay on afterwards. Okay.
All right.